Iran has claimed responsibility for a series of airstrikes into Iraq, Pakistan, and northern Syria this week that they claim targeted a, quote, Israeli spy headquarters and targets linked to the extremist Islamic State. Pakistan has recalled its ambassador to Tehran and warned that Iran could face serious consequences. Islamabad described the strikes as an unprovoked violation of its airspace and claims 2 children were killed. Iran's foreign minister sat down with CNBC from Davos to deliver a sobering message to President Biden.
And keep the promises that they have made to us. The second thing I would like to say is that the United States should not, Mr. Biden should not, tie their destiny to the fate of Netanyahu. The full-scale cooperation of Biden and the White House with thugs like Netanyahu in Israel is the root of insecurity in the region. President Biden should immediately abandon his full support for this genocide of the Palestinians and the killing of more than 13,500 Palestinian children. Netanyahu has reached the end of the tunnel, and no medical equipment and no oxygen capsule can revive or save Netanyahu. But throughout history, resistance against the occupation has always been legitimate. We benefit from the peace and security in the region. The security of the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and international waters is in our interest. Stop the war in Gaza and allow peace to be restored in our region.
Meanwhile, American diplomats have sent a, quote, private message to their counterparts in Yemen after the U.S. and U.K. bombed portions of the country to stop the Houthi-led blockade of weapons and shipments from entering Israel. The Houthis launched a series of counterstrikes this week, including one that hit a U.S.-owned vessel. They vowed further retaliation. Joining us now to weigh in on the state of things in the region is host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Welcome back to Rising.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Always love to be here.
We love to have you. Help us understand the posture here of what's going on. Obviously, different sides are representing differences of responsibility and whether or not the strikes that have been conducted are legitimate, both morally and under international law. What's your read?
Well, I tell you, this is a very alarming state of affairs that exists right now and something we need to be paying a lot of attention to, because the whole Middle East now is like a powder keg which could explode. And what you're seeing here is the process of the fact that we don't have a good strategy for the region, because we want to basically try to have everything. You want your cake and eat it too. We want a peaceful Middle East, but we want to be able to go and launch strikes anytime we want. We want to be able to let Israel do whatever they want to do and not say anything differently, but we don't want other people in the region to be mad. And the end result is you're basically going to have nothing that you want. You don't have peace, and you don't have a situation where the Israelis are happy or moving towards peace or any of those kinds of things. When we started having American troops that were attacked in Syria and Iraq, we had these so-called strong messages that we wanted to send a message to Iran and to these groups. And of course, the message was laughed at because they're little pinprick attacks. And these people are ready for combat, as we should see here. Now we're trying to do the same thing in the Red Sea. Then, with Houthis in there. Now we're, assassinating people in Baghdad, as well as Israel, and it's just causing this powder keg to go higher. And here's the alarming thing. You see that Iran is losing their fear of the United States because they're openly taking credit for some of these things. And now in that clip you just showed with their foreign minister basically lecturing us, I mean, they wouldn't have done that in the past because they had been afraid of the response. But right now, they're not afraid of the response. And you have the U.S. constantly saying at every level,
the promises that
we
they
don't
have
want
made.
an escalation. We don't want an escalation. But they're willing to do these little things because they want them to work, but they're not going to work because Iran can handle that. These real groups can handle that kind of stuff, and it just emboldens them to go more. And the danger is that finally you get it like these guys like Jack Keane, like Lindsey Graham, who were saying wipe, a lot of these things in Iran off the map, that Biden maybe goes in too heavy, and then we find ourselves in a war. And this is a very, very dangerous time for us right now.
Absolutely, and we don't want to see larger conflict in the region, although I guess some people, as you sort of just pointed out, might say, well, if these pinpricks don't work, if Iran doesn't fear us, they need to be made to fear us, not with some kind of open conflict with what Lindsey Graham wants to do, but are we required then to respond to the Houthis in a more who have actually attacked at this point U.S. ships? So we have some ability to even constitutionally speaking to respond. Do we need to make some kind of show of force to put the region back in line?
Yeah, that's exactly what Jack Keane says. He said on Fox, I believe it was just yesterday, that we need to go in there with a strong show of force and to hit, strong targets within Iran to show them what we're talking about, but we don't want a war. So he also wants his cake and eat it too. But here's the thing. We're in a horrible situation now because of years of a bad policy and years of doing things the wrong way. So right now, Robbie, there's no easy answer for this. There's no all right, if I was suddenly in charge, I'd tell Biden to do this and then everything would be okay. This is a case right now to where it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And we have to do everything necessary to make sure this does not expand and explode into a war, which could be catastrophic for our interests. So what I would suggest is that we need to start using a lot more diplomacy, and that means with Iran, with the Houthis, with Israel, and saying, all right, look, there's no going to be more blank check to do whatever you want because we have our own interests to worry about. And if necessary, we may have to go heavier than we have militarily if and only if American military or personnel interests are directly attacked. And I'm talking about, like the United States military, not just a U.S. flagged ship, because that is not enough, according to the U.S. Constitution and the 1973 War Powers Act, to take military action. And on that point, I would like to say any expansion of military force must go through Congress first. We have to follow our laws so that everybody knows what's at stake. Jack Keane, President Biden, they can't just say, yeah, let's launch some missiles, which could spawn a war for us. This must go through the people and the Congress.
Now, Iran's foreign minister, who we saw in that clip a little bit ago, really pointed to the idea that this is all stemming from the ongoing siege of Gaza, that people around the world, but in particularly in the Arab world, are horrified by what they see as a disproportionate response to October 7th. Of course, the Houthi blockade is premised on the idea that they're blockading ships in order to discourage Israel from continuing its siege on Gaza, saying they'll let ships through that have nothing to do with Israel, and that the blockade would stop if the siege stopped. That does suggest a kind of diplomatic solution will ultimately be the solution here. But as you pointed out, and as that Iranian official pointed out, it seems to be one that the United States and Joe Biden in particular is roundly willing to ignore. To that point, last night, Bernie Sanders put forward a resolution to encourage the State Department to report on any human rights violations by Israel during its military campaign. That vote failed 11-72. Just 11 senators were willing to vote for the mere threshold of an investigation into whether or not Israel is committing any kind of violations of international law in the regions. What does that vote portend to you?
Well, I tell you, look, we're at a point now where we're just going to have to decide what is important to us. Is it important to keep the basically the facade and the way things have always been, and the way that just the reflexive pro-Israel everything has always been, or do we want to recognize actual reality? Because I'm telling you, a lot of people won't want to hear this, but the fact is, we're going to have to start telling Israel, no more blank check. There are going to be some strings to this because our interests are now being harmed. And let me tell you why and how. Because all these countries all over the world, not the least of which is South Africa, and many countries are in the agreement with them, like some of the global South. I'm talking scores of countries are recognizing this. So this whole thing about us constantly just being the only voice in the United Nations or the UNSC that vetoes things while the whole rest of the world is in another side is giving emboldened to Iran to take actions like this, to the Houthis to take actions like this, because they see it's no longer all the world against them, but now it's increasingly part of the world against us because they don't like what's going on with the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And so if we want to change that dynamic, we're going to have to do something we don't want to do, and that is to tell Israel, you're going to have to cool the jets. Because if we don't, if we keep going on the path we are, these things are going to continue on, and we may come to a place where we're forced into either escalating into a war or backing down and being seen as losing diplomatically, both of which are bad outcomes for America. But that's where we're headed if we don't make some tough choices on our own.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Robbie.